Hello, and welcome to a special quarantine edition of The Phone Booth. I'm your host, Joe Pollard. What you're about to hear is the preview for Season 2 of The Phone Booth. If this is your first time listening to our podcast, then I suggest you go back to Season 1, Episode 1, and proceed in order. But don't worry, every episode of The Phone Booth is free on your podcast app, so I promise we'll be here when you get back. For those of you who have listened to Season 1, you must be anxious to know what happened next. Did we actually find Becca? Well, we were working on a few leads when unfortunately our investigation was put on hold due to the spread of the coronavirus. Believe it or not, hunting down a woman who's been dead for 20 years is actually pretty difficult during quarantine. But just because Becca is out of the picture does not mean the phone booth needs to stop. Since quarantine began, my producers and I have had a seemingly endless run of meetings trying to brainstorm the best way to continue the show. The general consensus that we reached, however, was to not continue at all. We thought it better to wait it out, and then, when we can, get back to the story people care about. But that didn't exactly sit right with me. After all, this podcast was not created for us to hunt Becca Orlovsky. Instead, this show was meant to interview normal people, dig into the human experience, and explore the ins and outs of our superpowered world. The first season admittedly got swept up by the Becca Orlovsky wave, and my producers and I thought it best to ride that wave instead of fight it. I do not regret that decision, but I do regret the smaller, more intimate stories that were lost because they didn't fit into the Becca narrative. I still wanted to tell these stories, I just couldn't figure out how. And then, as they so often do, our fans solved my problem for me. I received 2 emails, both sent separately, both from fans. They wrote that they loved the show, were losing their minds in quarantine, and wanted me to tell their story. I'll admit, at first I was a bit annoyed by their assumption, but as I continued to read, I found I couldn't stop. Because by then, I had an idea. I contacted the email's writers and asked if I could use their stories on the podcast. Then, I began to write emails to interesting individuals I had always wanted to interview, but never had the chance. I asked them to write me emails of their own. I wanted their stories. I thought 1 or 2 would reply, saying, "Thank you very much for your interests, but I just don't have the time." But that's not what happened. Instead, nearly every email I sent out got a response. Most often with pages upon pages of story. Suddenly, I found myself in possession of half a dozen emails detailing the lives of half a dozen fascinating people. And now, I'm going to read them to you. These emails will make up the second season of The Phone Booth, and will be different from our regular programming. They will be simple, unproduced recordings of me reading aloud to you. These episodes will not give any breaks on the mystery of Becca Orlovsky. If that is what you're looking for, I promise we will get back to Becca in Season 3. But for now, with the resources we have available to us, we will tell smaller stories of real people existing in this strange and increasingly scary world. So let's begin. Our first episode of this special second season will air next Monday on May 25th. If you would like to support the show, please check out our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/foolsgallery. This is a financially trying time for all of us, and we ask only for what you can share. From me, and all of us here at the Fool's Gallery Podcast Network, we would like to take a moment to thank our fans. The response to The Phone Booth has been absolutely overwhelming. It really makes all the hard work, late nights, and self-doubt worth it. You guys have been absolutely fantastic, so thank you for listening, for writing reviews, for reaching out to us, and for sharing the show with your friends. It really does mean the world to us. We hope you're staying healthy, and would like to welcome you to this special quarantine edition of The Phone Booth.